And now we're going to pivot to Europe. And that even though we haven't done an econ show in a little bit, there hasn't been too much new data out of Europe in a way that I think makes meaningful sense. We've seen some of the pricing for electricity go back up. There's a lot of issues that continues on securing the grid. France has struggled to bring a lot of the nuclear capacity back online, and that's not something that's going away. And that's, I think, a bigger issue in general. And one of the key pieces when we start looking at like trade balance. So trade balance came in at a negative 11.3 billion, and then across it on negative 30.6 billion. So it's just kind of that back and forth where you have look at car registrations, fairly stable. Survey expectations actually came in much lower than the prior. So in February, it was 29.7. In March, it was 10. Still positive, but still, again, just something to watch when you look at underlying activity. Construction output month on month came in at 3.9%, which had been negative. So that was a nice reversal in Jan. The question is, what happens in February and March? Because there's been a mixed piece. Like there are some areas where construction has gotten worse, especially when you look at PMIs. So, and that's looking at February and March, which we'll talk about it in a moment, where manufacturing has gotten worse again, construction deteriorated in Germany. So I think some of that movement to the downside will likely be the case. Consumer confidence in March was expected at negative 18.2, came in at negative 19.2, which is also worse than February. So again, you're seeing some of that deterioration in the consumer confidence, but it's still not showing up in services. So Eurozone manufacturing was expected at 49, came in at 47.1. So again, very weak. That is a significantly negative number. And if for a country or an area that is very reliant on their export markets, that is something to watch when you look at their economic strength. Composite PMI was expected at 52, came in at 54.1 because of services. And services was expected at 52.5, came in at 55.6. That is a real number. That is a very good number when you look at what happened in March. But then you look at consumer confidence, came in at negative 19.2. Economic confidence came below estimates at 99.3. Industrial confidence actually turned negative to negative 0.2. Service confidence was expected at 10, came in at 9.4, and was below February. So again, there's that back and forth, and manufacturing is worsening, which is an important piece to the European economy in general. But there's a lot of confusion, it seems, as to what index is right for the consumer. Because on one hand, you're seeing strength, and then on the other hand, you're seeing a conditional weakness. So it's going to be it's a mixed bag, and I can't tell you which one's going to win. I would say that based on what we've seen in the past, given real wages have continued to be weak in Europe, the banking crisis expanding, now taking down Credit Suisse, which should have gone bankrupt or at least been bought out 10 years ago at a minimum. It's just, there's going to be more pain, and there's a lot of fear in Europe right now because not fear in the sense of a bigger problem, but fear along the lines of what is going to happen with the industrial sector now that you have some perpetual shortfalls and issues when you're looking at account balances. You have France that is increasing the retirement age from 62 to 64, resulting in a significant amount of strikes, protests, and it's the countries are going to have to tighten their belts and make some of these social adjustments because there's a problem on the current account side. There is a problem in terms of some of these benefits, and that is going to just continue to become a longer term issue. And that's why when you look at the Eurozone PMI is staging a bit of a V-shaped recovery. The question is it a false start? And that's where I don't know. I think that there's enough data saying that it is, but the service number was good. And you have to look at, are people going to shake off what has happened and continue to spend? Or is this, as we talked about from the Liz Ann Saunders chart about the US, where even though we were in a recession, you saw spending increase before you got a fairly sizable decrease. And I don't know. And I think that's going to be a very important one to watch. So now when we turn to Germany, PPI month over month was expected to be at negative 1.4%, and it came in at negative 0.3. So again, inflation is surprising to the upside again, which is, I think, the bigger concern. So this is why when, can you say that it's a false start and things are going to get better? It's like, well, PPI year over year, expected at 14.5%, came in at 15.8%. That's a sizable miss. And I think it is a big issue in terms of underlying flows, which is why the ECB is going to have to stay active, and we're going to continue to see these pressure points. Survey expectations was expected at 15, came in at 13. Current situation was expected at negative 44.3, came in at negative 46.5. So again, you're starting to see Germany soften further. German manufacturing was expected at 47, came in at 44.4. But services was expected at 51, came in at 53.9. That's a positive. So the question is, does the expectations, does the current situation, does the rampant inflation hurt services? And my first thought would be yes, but it doesn't mean that that's going to be the case. That's why it's going to be an important one to watch as we progress through the rest of April and May to see how is summer going to play out. Because if you looked at driving, if you looked at airlines, you would say that the consumer isn't as strong, but yet here we are. Business climate was expected at 91, came at 93.3. Current assessment expected at 94.1, came at 95.4. Expectations expected at 88.3, came in at 91.2. And consumer confidence expected to be at negative 30, came in at negative 29.5. So again, you kind of get this back and forth as to what makes the most sense and where are we going to go from here. CPI month over month expected to be at 0.7, came in at 0.8. As we were talking about, you're starting to see this acceleration. CPI EU harmonized month over month was expected at 0.8, came in at 1.1%. That is a problem. And that's where when you start looking at the ECB and their activities, they're going to have to keep raising rates. And that's going to put more downside pressure on top of the fact that they've stayed too long, too low. They've had negative rates. And that's why we think that services will weaken faster as we get this pressure to the upside. Now, the IFO business climate in Germany, excuse me, when you look at the different pieces, manufacturing expectations have improved for manufacturing in the service sector, but for trade and construction, it's leveled off and actually started to turn downward. So again, we're in a crossroads. And in that crossroads, I would say that there's probably more pressure to the downside, but it also supports the fact that we don't see this massive collapse. It's not like all of a sudden you're going to turn around and be like, oh, yep, there's Europe down 30%. It's going to be a slow grind, and that's why we think it's going to be way more painful going forward. Now you look at France, retail sales came in at negative 4.3% in February. Unlikely to be much better in March given the underlying. Manufacturing was expected at 48, came in at 47.7. While services expected at 52.5, came in at 55.5, taking composite to 54. So again, that is a good number. Now that you're starting to see some of the problems that are forming, and now you're starting to see some of the anger that's been built up, that's where you start to look at, okay, well, how much pressure is going to be to the downside? What should we factor in? Business confidence in line at 103, manufacturing confidence right around 104, production outlook -1. So you're kind of again, it's this precipice, and the problem is I think the ECB has to keep raising rates, which is going to surprise some, and again move us further down. Now the electricity consumption for road transport continues to move higher across Germany, Netherlands, France, Italy, Spain. And that's when you start looking at the grid and you're adding more stress to it, and you're taking away some of that backup gen of natural gas and coal because it needs to have, again, that green solution backdrop. And that's where, again, electricity prices, so obviously natural gas has come down. We think that even as natural gas prices have come down and kind of stabilized, you're going to start to see electricity prices bifurcate and actually start to rise because, yes, not enough natural gas obviously made electricity prices worse, but there was a natural gas shortage, but there's also an electron shortage. And that is something that we think gets ignored more often than not, even as you have new demand coming on by way of electric vehicles. That is going to be, I think, an interesting piece over the next couple of years. So that's what we have for you on Europe. In the next segment, we're going to go deeper into China and Asia in general, and what are some of the issues that we see forming on the Chinese front.